Evangelization versus proselytizing. The Bible is calling all Christians to be evangelists, in many different ways, but we're all to be evangelists. But we have to worry about the curse, Jesus said. And he said it in Matthew 25:13. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves. All right. If you're interested in doing evangelization, you want to definitely make sure you're not doing whatever Jesus is talking about there, because that is a bad curse. So what is a proselyte? What is proselytizing? And how do we stay away from that, right? Proselytes have a long history in the Bible. This condemnation Jesus is making is not 100%. It's like when he would get after the scribes and Pharisees, or the Sadducees and Pharisees. There were Pharisees who joined Jesus, It was a condemnation of an idea that was wrong at that time, but it wasn't, something that should be taken too far. It wasn't like there was never a good Pharisee. Here's the situation with proselytes. They're in the Old Testament. They were a foreigner who had joined Israel. They were not ethnically Jewish, but they had taken upon the whole Jewish religion, hook, line, sinker, followed all the kosher laws, gotten circumcised, and they became a proselyte. No wonder there were more women than men who were proselytes, because there was a pretty big stigma about an adult male going that last yard and getting that circumcision part of the proselyte. There was an alternative to being a proselyte, maybe less formal, called a God-fearer. This is someone who did think the Jewish religion was almost certainly right, did have a devotion to God, the Jewish God, but wasn't yet ready to take on all that kosher law and that circumcision. Kind of like the early Christians when they converted. They didn't take all that kosher law when they converted. So the God-fearers were Gentiles who converted, who didn't do that final proselyte step. And this was a big deal at the time of Jesus' day, because for a while at that point, Judaism was a worldwide idea. It was something that was not a local religion. It was something that was considered on par as a new way to view the world, like the ancient philosophies of Stoicism, Epicureanism, all of those. Judaism, next to them, what do you think of this? What do you think of us? It was presenting itself as a worldwide belief system that people were converting to, finding attractive, becoming God-fearers, becoming proselytes. And what Jesus is condemning is this thing that would happen where, just like when you read in the New Testament about people who convert to Christianity and then the Jews come behind and say, oh, well, you're not really saved or whatever because you're not following all the kosher law, and this huge guilt trip, throw everyone into confusion. The good news doesn't sound like good news anymore because there's so much guilt associated with it, etc., etc. That's the proselytizing tendency. That was happening within Judaism before Christianity ever came along. People going around, going to God-fearers, trying to get them to circumcise themselves and submit to the whole kosher law. And that's what Jesus is kind of blowing out of the water here with, you travel on sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourself. So, you might be thinking, shoo, I'm not trying to get anybody to follow the kosher law, I'm okay. And there's a way to be a Christian, a Protestant, or a Catholic proselytizer. And we need to steer clear of this. One more thing I want to point out. When you read, now that I've told you about proselytes and God-fearers, read the New Testament, think in those terms. You'll see proselytes mentioned, good proselytes who became Christian. You'll see, I think in Acts 6, there's an example of one. You'll see God-fearers mentioned. Cornelius, who Peter goes to, was a man who feared God, although he wasn't Jewish, wasn't a proselyte. When the Jews came for the sake of a centurion who built them a synagogue, that guy was almost certainly a God-fearer, but was not a proselyte. So this is throughout it's kind of neat when you know about it, because it's throughout the New Testament. It kind of unlocks that a little bit about what they mean when they're talking about proselytes and God-fearers in the New Testament. So what is Christian proselytizing? Well, we have a law and a code, kind of like the Jews did. We have a huge moral code. We have a lot of expectations of worship. And if you lead in your evangelization carrying a book of the new book of rules, the new Christian book of rules, you're not doing it right. You're proselytizing. When Paul went to the original apostles in the book of Acts at what they call the Council of Jerusalem, and he said, should I be trying to preach kosher law, or should I just be talking about the good news? The apostles met and came out with 3 principles. They said, you're right, just keep preaching the good news, don't worry about the kosher law, but honor 3 things. Tell them not to eat food sacrificed to other idols, don't drink the blood, and last, don't fornicate. That's the first catechism. That's kind of the first minimal moral rule that was ever given by the apostles to guide the great evangelization, the evangelization that spread like fire. Just tell them not to eat that food sacrificed to idols, tell them not to fornicate, don't eat the blood, not really tempted to eat the blood, not a problem. So that's that first evangelization, and even that is a little bit, we're told, isn't to be taken that seriously. Even that's not to be treated legalistically. Paul later says that when you're in the market buying meat, don't say, hey, was this sacrificed to an idol? Because if it is, I can't buy it because I can't eat it. Don't do that. Just assume it wasn't unless somehow it comes up. He's saying don't even make a big deal about that. So when we evangelize, we have to think about this. Are we coming with a code, like, I want you to be moral, so become Christian, Or do we have this ideological feel, like, I'm going to prove to you this system of ideas, like, you're going to join my political party because I just convinced you in all these ways? Or are you trying to bring someone with good news, into better relationship with God? What is the way that you're approaching this missionary call? If you're bringing people the good news and bringing them into better relationship with God, you're evangelizing. If you're trying to inflict something on someone, if you're trying to make someone join up and sign up, you're proselytizing. If you're trying to be legalistic about it, you're proselytizing. And that is scary because the curse by Jesus is pretty scary. So think about that, and think about how that exists throughout the world. I think that Christian evangelism has a bad rap right now because a lot of people have seen that all evangelism is proselytizing. Not true, but that's a belief that's out there in the secular world. And when you look, and if you want to see what proselytizing looks like, right now, Islamic fundamentalism is a big deal. I'm not closed-minded that Islam doesn't have a way to have a relationship with God within it, that it can't help people in ways. But the way Islamic fundamentalism is spreading is proselytizing. They're bringing a code to get people to buy into. They're not bringing a relationship with God. That's not part of the package. Anything that says that you can murder or rape or promote slavery is not got any relationship with God. If you need a better authority than Clark Massey, Pope Benedict's Deus Caritas Est, first part of that encyclical, it's just saying, look, if you're preaching hatred, you're just not with God. You're not evangelizing. So, think about that. That's what proselytizing looks like. Christians do it. You don't even want to do a dumbed-down version of it. You want to just get away from it. And you want to get to the core of the gospel, the core of spreading the good news. And we'll make some more videos that'll hopefully help with that process. This video was just about what not to do.